Three. Hello, this is Miguel. This is How Was the Race? Um, Today we are going to be talking about the Jim Thorpe Marathon. Jim Thorpe Marathon is in Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania. It's about an hour and a half east of Hershey, Pennsylvania, if you happen to know where that is. If not, you have Google Maps, and I'm sure you all can figure it out. So today we're going to have Andy with us. Andy has ran several marathons. He's at 10, I believe, and with uh, he's at 10 marathons, and um, so far him and I have not ran together. However, we have ran same marathon in different years. He ran Chicago Marathon in 2015. I ran Chicago Marathon in 2019 and other years. And I think that's the only one that we have both. Oh, and I ran the Fort Chickamauga half. He ran the Fort Chickamauga full. And that's outside of Chattanooga, Tennessee, about 15 minutes into Georgia there. So for those that happen to know where Chattanooga is. So today we're going to be featuring a beer from the brewery in Hershey, Pennsylvania called Trogs. Trogs Brewery. It's a really nice place. I've been there myself. Nice beer hall. Nice, large, lots of options, lots of beer on tap. We're going to be featuring the Bourbon Barrel Age Impending Descent. This is a little bit of the nice thicker side of a 12% ABV. IBUs unavailable. However, I would probably put in my personal about a 20 IBU, maybe 25 IBU, but that's being a little bit unfair. It's probably more like a 15 to 20 IBU. However, they don't have it listed, so we do not know for sure. We're going to give it 4 medals out of 5. And we're going to be enjoying that while we conversate with Andy about the Jim Thorpe Marathon. So, how did you come about hearing about the Jim Thorpe Marathon?
The Jim Thorpe Marathon is actually a quite interesting story. My mother is a huge fan of Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania. She's been there several times and she's vacationed there whenever she gets the chance. She says it's the most beautiful town. So looking for places to run, I found Jim Thorpe. It's a small company, the Renegades, that put it on, and their website's very sparse with very little information. And it took just a couple emails to find out what the deal was. And it's interesting because I told my brother who wanted to run this as well, and he said, "Well, I don't know about doing the full, so let me do the half." And in 2022, he decided to do the half marathon. Now, he did this all on his own. And he goes, "Well, I signed up for this race." I go, "Well, let me look into it." And I found out about it. And I ended up signing up without telling him. And I was going to surprise him. I was going to fly my mother up with me, and we were going to sneak to Jim Thorpe and just surprise him. Find his hotel and just surprise him there. Well, lo and behold, about 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks before, he had his bib mailed to him. So he didn't have to pick it up. He was just going to have it mailed to him. They mailed him my bib. So he calls me. He goes, "What are the odds of another Andy Wade from Davenport, Florida, running Jim Thorpe half marathon?" I go, "Whoa, that's a really strange coincidence, isn't it?" You got me. So we actually ran the half marathon in 2022, but it was such a good experience. It's a small town race, and when we picked up the bids, I met the race director, and I go, "Yeah, you ruined my surprise." He goes, "Well, ain't that a kick in the nuts?" Not the response I was expecting, but the race was good. We liked it. We decided to go back. So this past year, 2025, we actually ran the full marathon. Now, the half marathon is an out and back starting from the finish line. You run 6.5, turn around. But the full marathon actually starts in a little town called Whitehaven, I believe. Whitehaven, which is about 25, 26 miles north. And it's a really cool experience because you can either take a train from Jim Thorpe all the way up to the starting line, or you can start whenever you want. They have a rolling start from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m.
Okay.
So we decided to just kind of roll up, and whenever we got out of bed, we'd run up there. And the race director said, "As long as you're ready to start by 8 o'clock, you can start anytime." And yeah, I guess I kind of went a little off topic on that, but the race director with the emails was, aside from his bad jokes, was actually really helpful in telling you everything about the race, even though the website's pretty sparse.
Okay. How was the registration process within its was were they using, was it Athens, I think is one of the major ones out there?
I believe they were on run sign up, so it was
Okay.
easy as it can be. What's really neat is they give you the ability to buy extras, so you sign up for the race, you can also buy extra merchandise. So there's no expo, as to speak, but you can purchase shirts ahead of time, so you don't have to worry about it. I got a shirt. One of their slogans is "Run like a bear is chasing you." Because you're running through the gorge, in the woods. So I bought a shirt like that. They had it waiting for me. So that was really cool. This process for signing up couldn't have been simpler once you get there.
Okay. Was there dealing with the emails with the RD? You said it was a little bit of a sparse race. Was there a lot of emails leading up to the race? Was it few and far between, just enough to get the bare bones information?
The information was actually pretty good. I wouldn't say it was a step above bare bones. It wasn't inundating my inbox, but it was enough that because they had more this year, I think, than before, because just the week before the race, a wildfire broke out on the mountain across the river from the park. And if you looked on Facebook, the people that live in Jim Thorpe were sharing it. The wildfire was crazy, but they were very upfront, very informative. They said, we're worried about the air quality. We're not worried about the fire. It's on the other side of the river, but we're worried about the smoke. And they go, the air quality index, according to, I can't remember I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank on what organization that they said. They go, if the air quality index gets too high, cancel the race. If the air quality index hits, I believe, 100, the amount of pollution in the air, if it hits 100 parts per million, you should cancel the race. They said right now we're at 50. But for reference, Philadelphia is at 69. And Philadelphia doesn't wildfire. So I think we're okay. So they're very congenial with the emails. They're giving you what you need, but they're also, aside from informative, they're also kind of assuaging any of your worries. You hear about this fire, you're like, oh no, they're going to cancel the race. You're like, don't worry, we'll figure it out. We're already working on a backup plan. So they were very forward with the information. So I appreciated that.
Alrighty. Where was the expo? Was it a larger expo, a little bit small expo? Was it easy to find, navigate?
I'm going to answer your questions backwards. It was very easy to find because it was at a coffee shop right on the street in town, and it is as small of an expo as you can get. They literally had the front corner of the coffee shop, and they had a table set up, and they had all the bibs. Everything was laid out. It was super easy to get in and out because there's only a few hundred people running, right? I
Yes.
will say the first year when I did the half marathon, they had everything ready, all the shirts that you walked in, you picked it up, you walked out. This year was a little bit of a snafu. The race shirts didn't come in time, but they had a plan. They said, we're getting them. They're going to be here on Saturday, but we don't want to hand them out at, the packet pickup at the bib or at the expo. So we'll give it to you at the finish line. So after you cross the finish line, that's when you got your race shirt. But that was the only hiccup. Everything else was super easy, super fast. You walked in, gave them your ID, they handed you your information, you went on your way.
Speaking of the race shirts, you're wearing the Jim Thorpe Area Running Festival Marathon shirt right now. It has a
Yes.
train on one side and looks like a village on the other with the sun above it. Um, so that calls back to the train that you can take to the start line from the finish line.
Yep.
It's a steam locomotive. If I had a guess, it looks like two a 282 or 284 steam locomotive. Um,
Your guess is as good as mine. I do not know.
I'm a little bit of a excited about steam locomotives. I have a race coming up in 1 week, and there's a scenic train that takes has a ride after the half marathon. So I'm looking forward to going out
Oh,
there
that's
with
gonna
my
be
family,
fun.
and yeah. So now, with that being a small expo, I assume there was no vendors. So if you forgot like your socks or your shorts or something like that, you probably had to find somewhere else to pick that up.
Yeah, you were pretty much out of luck if you're looking for anything specialty. They didn't have anything big. They had some small things. They had some goos set up if you wanted to, kind of get some fuels that you might not have been able to bring. But like you said, shoes, socks, nothing on the big merch side. T-shirts and goo,
Okay.
magnets.
Now, did they offer? Now, you mentioned that they offered to ship you your packet or your bib. Did
Mhm.
they offer same day packet pickup as well, or no?
Not same day. You had to pick it up by Saturday. So the race was, they had the half marathons on Saturdays, the fulls are on Sunday. So half marathon had to be picked up by Friday, full marathon had to be picked up by Saturday. No race day pickup was available.
So if somebody was wanting to do a double the half on a Saturday and a full on Sunday,
Mhm.
they could they could do the same race, and I assume the last 6 miles are the same 6 miles for the half and the full.
They are, yes. They also have a 7 mile option. The 7 mile option's on Marathon Sunday, and you have to take the train, and they literally stop the train in the middle of the woods, and you get off 7 miles from the finish line, and it's good luck, and then you begin. And then the train takes the rest of the runners to the starting line for the full marathon. But they have the half marathon, the 7 miler, and the full marathon all weekend long. You could do all not all three. That's impossible. You could do the half and the seven. You could do the half and the full. You can mix it up if you want to. If you didn't want to just do the full marathon.
Okay. I know for myself, I'm going through with 50 half marathons. Well, half marathon in every state and a full marathon in every state. This coming week, I'm doing the Washington half, and then the following week, I'm doing a Washington full. They're both along uh, the mountain range area, the Pacific Crest, just off the Pacific Crest Trail. I forget the name of it. I guess that Sierra Nevada is down south. I forget what that mountain range is called with Mount Rainier. And
Is it the Cascades?
yes, 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 that's it. That's it. So I'll be crossing off my half and full. It won't be the same course, but it'll be
Okay.
a similar scenery, I imagine.
I imagine it's going to be beautiful. And Jim Thorpe was beautiful as well. The half, I wouldn't recommend if you're going for only scenery because it's an out and back, so you see everything twice, and it's closer to the Jim Thorpe area where it's more railroad centric because the course itself is an old railroad line. So even though you're in the mountains in the Poconos, it's actually flat. And the speaking on the full, it's a steady almost perfect 1% downhill the entire race. And if you've been following the Boston Marathon, it is not too much of a net elevation loss that there's no penalty. Um, because if you heard the news recently, the if a course has more than 1,500 feet of elevation loss, it's a 5 minute penalty to your qualifying time. Jim Thorpe is, I believe, 1,200 feet, so it's underneath that, and it's just a constant 1% downhill from minus a little bit at the beginning, the last 24 miles downhill, and you run along this river, and it's absolutely beautiful on the left side. On the right side, you're running through this trail that cuts through the woods. There's waterfalls along the way. So I imagine what you're going to see in Washington isn't going to be too dissimilar to what I saw in Pennsylvania.
I know the Jack and Jill full is the that's the full that I'm going to be running, and one of the features is the number of waterfalls and
Mm,
I believe bridges that you cross or waterfalls that you see. And it's also a former it's a rail trail with a net downhill.
that makes sense. Yeah, I was going to say those rail trails, beautiful scenery. So.
Really is, really is. Um, so getting to the start of the race for at the at the beginning of the rail, was it plenty of parking available? Was the parking a little more sparse?
So yeah, the parking at the finish line is huge. There's a huge parking area that you pay through the app. It's easy. But as far as the starting, like getting to the race, you have a few options. You could take the train. You have to book that in advance. It does sell out. So if you don't sign up early enough, you can't take the train. You have to find your own way there. There is parking. I didn't experience the parking. They have a few spots near the race start itself, and then they have a satellite lot that they partner with the local high school, the Whitehaven High School, and then they run a shuttle. And I did see buses, transporting people while I was transporting myself. But I was lucky enough that my sister-in-law drove my brother and I to the starting area, and she was able, the drop-off area was just maybe a minute walk. because you pull off on the side street and then you walk through a park, and then right there is the starting area. And the starting area itself is really easy to navigate. They have a big ring of porta potties, where you can stage. They have the race director was there DJing, had music playing. He was on the microphone giving people the instructions. Because as I had mentioned earlier when I went off topic, is it's a rolling start. So at 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. you just start because you cross the timing mat. They start your timer. So it's if you want to get going, which if you're worried about the weather, this year the weather was absolutely perfect. It was in the 40s at the start, so it wasn't going to be too hot that day. Maybe in 60s, I think it capped off at by the time we finished, but it wasn't too hot, so we weren't worried about the race itself. And then what you do is you start by heading north up the trail for a mile, turn around, double back that 1 mile, cross near the starting area again, and then head south for the rest of the race. So that was probably the only confusing part because my brother and I got there and we, got ready, got loosened up, took off our throwaway clothes. Not that we didn't have any throwaway clothes at the starting area. We gave them to my sister. But we were standing there. Well, what do we do? Because it was so informal. Do we start? Do we wait? What do we do? And we said, well, why don't we have the true race experience? So we waited until 8 a.m. Because at that point, right as we were getting ready, we looked up and the train had arrived. So all the runners that were on the train were there at the same time. So we were there maybe 10 minutes before the train arrived. And we were like, well, at this point, might as well wait another 10 minutes and we'll race start. And that was kind of a cool experience because the trail is relatively narrow. You could probably fit 5 people shoulder to shoulder at most of it, so it's not a terribly wide course, but it got a little hairy because that first mile at the turnaround, it's an out and back. So we're like, well, we don't want to start before the main crowd because we'll be turning around and then we'll have to run against the crowd instead of running with the crowd. So we waited until the actual start. The race director got on, made his announcements, gave us a countdown, 3, 2, 1, and we all took off. And when I say we all, there was maybe 150 of us starting at the same time. So even though the trail is relatively narrow at points, it didn't feel too bad. We were able to run and pass, and any race that you run, you're going to find someone slower that you have to pass. You just pass people. There was time and place, and it didn't feel too harrowing. So the starting line was pretty good. Like I said, the parking situation, they had shuttles for if you drove yourself, or the drop off was super easy. And yeah.
Okay. Now, that makes me think back. You talk about the rolling start. I remember I ran the Deseret News Marathon. We'll talk. We'll bring that up in a different episode. The Deseret News Marathon in Salt Lake City, Utah. It's a race in July, I believe, and it's on Pioneer Day, which Pioneer Day is a particular date, and it's a state holiday in Utah. And but the race, it's without getting too heavy into the weeds, they do let you can start prior to the official race start. The only issue being that you cannot win an age division or the overall.
That makes
So
sense.
for myself, who is nowhere near any age group or overall division, unless it's like a 10-person race and there's nobody in my age division, uh, I elected to go ahead and start early. However, that was a decision partially based on the fact that it was Utah in summer and the race at the finish of the race at, I believe, 9 a.m. It was in the neighborhood of 90 degrees.
Yeah, you want to get out of possible in that case.
Yes. But it was only 20% humidity.
It's a dry heat. I got you.
Yeah. Okay, so the race is only being 150 runners. That's a small, a very small race. One of the smaller ones that I that that I familiar with was the aid stations. Were there a lot of aid stations where they staffed 2 or 3 people, 10 people, one person, nobody, just a jug of water sitting there?
No, surprisingly, the aid stations were pretty good. They were 2 to 3 miles apart, so they weren't every mile. but they were spaced out enough that you could get water when you needed it. There was 2 to 3 people. I'd say generally there was 2 people at most of them. And it was a table and they had water and they had not they I want to say I could have swore it was strawberry banana, but they told me afterwards it was watermelon. You can watermelon electrolyte was the drink on the course. And I thought it was strawberry banana, but that was just my delirium in the middle of the race, I guess. I don't know. But they had 2 people at each. There were a couple bigger stations.
Okay.
The halfway point was pretty big. Well, just past the halfway point, there was a cross street, a bridge that people could actually park near. So they had more people there. And the half marathon turnaround, or about at about around mile 20, a little before, um, there was a pretty big station because again it had car access. But other than that, the aid stations themselves were just a couple of people, handing out bottles or cups of water and having trash cans, and they told you ahead of time, do not throw away trash anywhere on the course. Our permits are contingent on us not littering. So they had ample trash cans after, a decent distance, 100 yards after the table. There would be a couple trash cans so that you can make sure your cups or any gel packets, all your trash could be thrown away. They, I would say they were ample. They didn't run out of water when I ran by. They didn't run out of anything I needed. They gave away goose at the halfway point, or sorry, not goose, wrong name. The UCAN gels. They had those given out if you needed it, if you didn't have your own. So they were pretty well stocked, and I was pretty happy. I was surprised at how many times the guy on the bike passed me. That made me start to worry because um being on a remote trail, they had people on bicycles, like mountain bikes, just going back and forth. And if you needed problems, then they could radio or go get someone on an ATV to come get you. And I did see one woman actually stop and get assistance, and he goes, "There's a aid station 2 miles back. I'll ride." I could hear this conversation. You're in the middle of the woods. There's no one around because they were ahead of me. And as I ran past, he's like, "I'm gonna ride back. I'm gonna get some help, and I'll be right back to you." So they were all around you. So although we were in the middle of nowhere, I never felt, stranded. So the aid station, the medical, everything was on point.
That's good. Just a little look behind the curtain for other people out there. A lot of times people ask, what is why am I paying to do an organized race? And
Mm.
the aid stations are generally staffed by the people there themselves are not being paid. However, they're often, depending on the size of the race and everything else, everything is, I can't speak, there's not one for every single race, but that aid station is is often staffed by a volunteer group. And that volunteer group is getting some funds to provide volunteers for the aid station. However, at smaller races, so you're looking at 150 marathon runners compared to, say, Indianapolis Monumental, which is, I think, closer to 5,000 marathoners, maybe 7,000. You're most likely those volunteers are with some type of the race itself is probably put on by a local community group, and that the volunteers are helping so that the race that is for the benefit of a local charity can have runners have a better experience.
Hmm.
So the volunteer at smaller races, you're paying for permits, you're paying for official finish time, you're paying for a medal and a shirt, but you're also paying so that charity can have funds to better operate, and the volunteers are supporting the race, yes, but they're also supporting that charity. So when you're looking at the Jim Thorpe Marathon, without me looking into any of the details, I ain't going to lie to anybody about that. Most likely, there's a local charity that's closely associated with the race, and the funds that you're paying to run the race is supporting that. Um, you spoke you spoke about the weather, getting ahead of the weather. I want to put it out there that the race is in late April.
Hmm.
So um, for those, I've ran several late April races. and it has been 40, 45 at the start, and it's also been 70 degrees at the start for a late April race. And that was always Louisville, Kentucky. That particular race where I went from 45 to 70 degrees between 9 years. So um, so yeah, so with that knowledge being out there, that might be why some people, that might be one reason you want to get ahead of the weather is a late April race. It
You
can
never
be,
know.
yeah, you never know. And call back to earlier, Andy currently lives in Florida.
Oh yeah.
So if you're from Florida and you travel up to PA might be 50 degrees at the start, which for those that live along that latitude, 50 degrees is not that bad. But if you're from Florida, you're like, oh my God, this is cold. And I'm sitting there in shorts and a tank top.
That's a true story. My brother who lives in Pennsylvania, he's like, "What are you shivering for? This is beautiful, 45-degree weather." I'm like, "Are you nuts? I am freezing out here." But it's just pre-chilling, to keep me cool before I started running. Tried to put a positive spin on it.
So as you're coming down the race, you're coming down the trail.
Mhm.
It's nice to know that the volunteers are out there. The aid stations are well stocked. By the way, I I've used UCAN myself on course, I believe twice. I personally don't use UCAN that often. I haven't been able to purchase it and train with it, so I don't really want to test it in in a race condition, because in a race condition, if things go south, you might lose your entire race because you tried something new. Um,
Mhm.
Personally, I usually use either Gatorade Endurance formula or I use Tailwind Nutrition, and I keep Tailwind. They sell individual packets pre-filled with powder, and at the aid stations, I can get my water bottle filled from one of the volunteers, and then I'll dump in my powder, and I can go that way. Because generally, it's if I'm doing a marathon, it's going to be Tailwind Nutrition or it's going to be Gatorade Endurance Formula. That's the two that I've tested for myself and trust. Now, I will say that I'm more of a party pack runner, and Andy is a Boston qualifier. So Andy's experience at the aid stations, they are going to be well stocked, and I don't doubt that if they're well stocked for Andy, they're not going to be well stocked for me. That's not something that I believe. However, I will say that depending on the race and everything else, and the further along you get in the race, if you're a Boston qualifier, which is around a 3:15 marathon time, which is what, a 7 minute mile roughly.
Well, Miguel, I do need to correct something.
Oh,
I am a Boston qualifier, but getting into my biography, not too much. I have multiple sclerosis, and I qualified through the Boston Adaptive Program, through their
oh,
Adaptive Program, which is a much slower qualifying time compared to normal age-based running.
okay,
Um, so my qualifying time was much slower. I'm a 4-hour marathoner myself.
okay,
So I would call myself middle of the pack as well. So when I say that the aid stations were full, we finished, I was pacing my brother that day. I wasn't running for myself, I was running for him, and we finished in 4 hours and 39 minutes,
okay.
for context.
And by the way, for everybody else out there, yeah, one, I did not know that he was.
I apologize. I should have led with that.
Um, Honestly, we speak of marathons, and I'll speak to Andy. Spoken to Ruth. I've spoken to Jill and Julia, and the list goes on and on. Pacer Jim. Honestly, the time is usually the last thing we talk about normally, because I will tell you what races he ran or I've ran or whatever. However, nobody really cares about your time. Once you put that medal around your neck, I will high five you, and we don't we don't we don't care.
We
We
all ran 26.2 miles.
exactly. Exactly. And I spoke to somebody who finished the Air Force Marathon in 2019 in 2 hours and 20 minutes. And I asked him, I said, how'd you do? He goes, not bad. I finished second. And I was like, what? And he goes, yeah, I came in at 2:20. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah. And we were speaking, and I said, well, my fastest time is at the time it was 4:42. And he goes, "What race was that?" And I said, "I ran it started out with me and two friends, and it finished with me and just one of those friends. The rate, the run, the 26.2 on the Garmin, and it was just in my hometown, just on trails and roads." And he said, well, how'd you do that?" I was like, I know the area." But what about your aid stations? What about your water? What about your nutrition? I was like, well, there's a water fountain over in this park. And he was more impressed that I could run 26.2 with no coach, no formal assistance. I believe he was sort of just flabbergasted. So he respected my 26.2, and he almost gave more reverence to it just because of the tenacity that it took to complete that than he was about his own 220 full, which was I think he was 220. It might have been 230. Either way, is crazy.
Anything under 3 is just mind-numbingly fast.
Yes. So anyhow, I'm not to get off on too many tangents, but we we don't care what your time was. We just care that you got it. We just care that you finished.
I just wanted to put it out there that I don't want to claim stolen valor that I'm a super fast runner. I agree, time doesn't matter, but I don't want people to think that I'm faster than I truly am. So I just wanted to be clear and get that off my chest.
Okay, that's very valid. So how was the race finish area? Was it only 100? I keep harping on the 150, but being a smaller race, I don't expect it to have a grand area. But how was the finish area?
It was actually really good. I think there was a total because with the rolling start, I think there was maybe 250 finishers, and they had more food than anyone could have finished. They had more bananas, more water bottles, they had pretzels, they had a good amount of just grab and go food. They had their award ceremony was really good. They had like the big podium, for the winners to stand on and get their pictures taken. It was beautiful underneath the railroad bridge. It was a just a city of tents where they had everyone set up. And this year, I can't speak to every year, but Bart Yasso, Yasso Hundreds, he was there. He was selling his book at the expo at the coffee shop, but he was there at the finish line. I got my picture taken with him, shook his hand, and said, thank you for helping me train because, Yasso 800s in my race predictors, every cycle I try to see what I can do. And he was there. I, got to meet Bart Yasso. That was really awesome. And there was just tons of people there. There was a medical tent I thankfully didn't need, but there were people being ushered in, like walking through the crowd looking for people. Because slouched down. They came over. I saw someone come over and say, "Hey, pat him on the shoulder. You okay?" Got the okay and left them. But they were watching out for you. The finish area was a big party. They had music. They had food. They had so much. It wasn't like big food. It wasn't a meal by any means, but it was more. They had I forget, it was the local hospital had these drawstring backpacks full of granola bars and different things inside that you could snack on. I was quite happy after finishing the race with the snacks that they gave. Still had to get food afterwards. We can talk about what Jim Thorpe after, but the snacks, the Gatorades, the waters, they had plenty. Being a small race, I was happily surprised that they had enough food for everyone.
Sometimes with the small races, him and I both ran the Fort Chickamauga Battlefield
Mm.
Marathon, half marathon, and I think there's a couple other distances in there. That one also, they had banana pudding, I remember, at the finish.
Banana pudding and moon pies.
Oh, yes. Oh, I thought I was going to get killed on the course. So I was talking to I was running the course and I was speaking to the other runners and I was like, so as I come into town, I see all these signs for moon pie. What's the big deal about the moon pie? They're like,
Oh
they're
boy.
made here. I was like, oh my bad. I'm so sorry. They're like, yeah, moon pies are from Chattanooga. So,
Hmm.
by the way, shout out to Burning River Brewery. They're in Chattanooga, Tennessee. They have a fried moon pie dessert. Yes, it's just as delicious as it sounds.
That sounds really good. No, I have to ask because I don't remember. I know we talked, but what year did you run Chickamauga?
I I believe I ran that in 18.
Okay, because I ran it in 16, and I remember the finish line, the tent. It was like a a line of tables with food all around. And I thought it was a really neat setup, being a small race that they had everything kind of in this enclosed loop, and you just grabbed a plate and just grabbed what you could go and what you could carry. Jim Thorpe is kind of similar to that, except it was more of a straight line, but it was kind of neat to see, kind of think about the difference between the two. I know many years have passed in between from 16 to 25, but the idea of just grab and go and just work your way down the line and pick up all your goodies, it was pretty organized.
Yes, that's and you don't always get that. I've ran several races in different locations, and I've Fort Chickamauga is a smaller one, and Chicago, I believe, is currently my largest. I've ran a few 25,000 and a few, or 145 and 47,000. You don't get much food in Chicago. You get an energy bar, and you get some water. You get an official beer or something like that, and it's like a lager or pilsner or something like that. I believe it is what it is. It's a beer. It tastes great because you're at the finish line in Chicago, but you do not get down home cooking.
When we talk Houston, we'll talk food.
Oof. Um, so we're going with that. Everything was raised. Was there many porta potties along the trail? Was there any full flush toilets along the course?
There were not many porta potties. There was a lack of bathrooms. They had a few, but being a very isolated trail, they could only put them where there were roads nearby to have access. With that being said, there was one at the half marathon, or just past the half marathon. There was a like a just a typical state park style bathroom. You walked in, there were two urinals and two stalls, and that was a nice, change. You expect porta potties at a race, but this one, that bathroom at the halfway point was nice. There was four stalls, so there was a little bit of a line, so you had to weigh your options, but um that was a better option than the woods that they stumbled upon. That I will say, I know two guys, it seems easy for us to talk about, using the woods. There were plenty of women coming out of the trees that you saw. So everyone was taking advantage of the scenery, if you would, to do their business.
Fair, fair.
But yeah, there was porta potties on the course, but not as much as like a big city race. It's just because the trail was literally in the middle of nowhere. It was in so far out in the woods that you would lose signal. They warn you not to trust your watches. Although I would argue that the watches were closer than they warned you that they would be. The watch was definitely over for the race, I think, but it didn't lose signal. My Garmin has the live track feature. It syncs to your phone, and as long as you have cell service, so my wife can track me on the course. At around mile 7, it said live track ended. I lost all cell service, so we were out in the middle.
I've yeah, I use the live track often. I've never actually needed the emergency feature. However, it has triggered once. I was clapping really. I don't know why, but I was clapping, like a normal rapid clap, and
Hmm.
that triggered the thing. However, I have two contacts, my girlfriend and my mom, and both of them somehow took about 10 minutes to respond.
Oh,
So that was reassuring. I was
I know
like,
mine has triggered twice. One, I with my MS, I have a footfall, so I have to be very conscious of taking big steps, or else my foot drags and I fall. And I fell maybe 100 feet from my driveway.
oh gosh.
So I turned off the alert. I didn't need to call my wife at that point. And then one time I was crossing the big road, the main highway in our town I had to cross, and I was crossing and a car was turning right, and I was already in the middle, but I was far enough away that he had plenty of time. It's a, 6-lane highway. So I'm like, go, and I'm waving my hand freely, but I was waving my watch hand, and I was waving my hand so much that, or so fast that it said, "Oh, incident reported." Like, no, I'm okay. Cancel.
I mean, but honestly, between the two, between incident and no indication, and we did an abnormal motion and we got an indication or an alert, I'd rather
And
say
on
that
the
there
side of
was no.
caution.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. In both instances, my mom and my girlfriend called me first before contacting emergency services.
Hmm. Just to
Also,
make sure.
neither one of them say they know what the information means. And I'm like, just tell the emergency responders what it says
Hmm.
and they will figure it out.
I was gonna say, go from there. That's a good starting spot. Just read that.
Yes, just read that. So now did you get a medal? Was I assume you got
Oh,
a medal.
I did get a medal, and it is absolutely beautiful. I don't have it with me. It's in my classroom. I'm a middle school teacher, and I hang up all my medals in my classroom so my kids can see. But it is absolutely beautiful. It is like a work of art. It is kind of it's a big medal. It's probably maybe 3, 4 inches in diameter. It says Jim Thorpe Marathon, and it's the word Jim Thorpe has the city painted in the letters. So you see something similar to the shirt with the train. I'm trying to point the train station that's right here in like the city, and then a train's going across the bottom of it, and then where it says Jim Thorpe, they paint like the sky. It is a beautiful medal. When I did the half marathon in 22, it was like a woodcut medal. That was kind of neat. It was different. I never had a woodcut medal before. That was my first one that I got. So the medals, going from 22 to 25 have been incredible. They really knock it out of the park with their medal designs.
I remember I ran Asheville, the Asheville Biltmore Marathon, half marathon, yada yada yada. I ran the half marathon there, and it was a wood medal. It looked like maybe a limb of I'm gonna say something like a an ash, or maybe it was more of a fruit tree. It smelled like a fruit tree, so maybe like a sassafras. Um, they just cut out, say, half-inch, 1-inch sections of a, say, 4-inch
Out of
diameter
a limb.
limb,
Oh, that's
and
pretty
yeah,
cool.
and they engraved it somehow. I don't know exactly what process they used, and it was unique. A lot of the smaller races, you'll find more generic medals, and that's an unfortunate side effect of a lot of small races. So
True.
it's nice to see that the Jim Thorpe Marathon invested a little more into having something that was still unique and not a runner hanging, the
Exactly.
silhouette of a runner, or something very generic that you just picked out of a magazine or website.
No, no, they did really good. I was really happy with that medal.
So if you how did you celebrate this race? I, yeah, how did you celebrate? Did you just eat the food at the finish line? Did you?
Well, we started there. That was the appetizers. I can't speak for everyone, but I know myself personally, all I want after a marathon is a greasy burger. Give me a cheeseburger, give me bacon, give me all the things you shouldn't eat. But after the race, I'm going for it. And right near, well, I shouldn't say near the finish line because the finish area is probably, I don't know, quarter to a half mile from the main street in town. And I remember we were walking out and somebody was walking up and asked me, "Hey, where's the finish line?" And I turn around and I go, "You see that bridge way back there? That's the finish line." He goes, "Oh, like, yeah, you got a ways to go." But it's not too bad of a walk. And you walk through the parking lot, you head in, and just in town is a place called Molly Maguire's Irish Pub. And they had outdoor seating, it was a beautiful day. And we got burgers, we got beer, and we just hung out, and it was a good party because there's not many places in Jim Thorpe. It's a small town, so everybody that was finishing the race, once they left the finish area, came into town, went to Molly McGuire's. It was packed. The whole outside patio was full of people who had finished the race. It was a fun experience.
No, I will say, so part of my motivation for doing 50 states, and it wasn't motivation for the half and full initially, but it became part of the motivation, is the experience two different parts of the state, two
Mm,
different versions of the state. And unfortunately, with Pennsylvania, I did my full in Pittsburgh and I did my half in Philadelphia. However, the Jim Thorpe Marathon, I've become interested in it in the last few days. However, uh, it conflicts with a Kentucky Derby Festival Marathon.
yeah.
Um, but maybe it might shift, sort of like the the Flying Pig shifts on whether or not it conflicts with the Derby Marathon. So I'll keep my eye. But it's nice to, because I did Pittsburgh and I did Philadelphia, but those are both major cities,
Hmm.
and it'd be nice to visit a more I don't want to call it rural, but less urban, less
It is
populated.
definitely. I haven't done Pittsburgh. I grew up outside of Pittsburgh. I've been to Pittsburgh. I've run the Philadelphia Marathon twice, and it is night and day running through the city compared to running down the trail and Jim into Jim Thorpe. Night and day. It is a completely different experience. It's a completely different side of the state. You drive, you can fly into Scranton, you can fly into Allentown. I flew into Allentown and it's about 45 minutes north. And just the drive is a different world compared to what you're used to. If I live in Florida. We're full. Don't move to Florida. There's too many people here. But you get out in the countryside of Pennsylvania, and it's just old towns, old farms, and the running is spectacular. Just the scenery, driving and being in town is spectacular. It's a different world, and it's nice to get out and see, like you said, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia. People see those. You go to cities, but get outside those cities. It's worth it.
Um, okay. Anything before we end the episode, is there anything you'd like to add? Anything you'd like to say? I know we spoke earlier about that we don't care about time. We only care about the brotherhood, the humanity of each other, celebrating each other, high-fiving each other,
Hmm.
regardless of your 6:15 finish, 4:15 finish, 2:45 finish. We don't care about your time. We don't care about a lot of the things that some people might be a little more timid of. So we got that. We spoke of that. That was a tangent. Not just went on it twice. Is there anything else you would like to add?
Yeah, a couple things. One positive, one negative, I'll say. And it's not even negative in the sense that it's not anything you can control. It's really dependent on the weather. The course itself is hard pack gravel. It's I ran Marine Corps and I there were more potholes in Marine Corps than there were in Jim Thorpe. Okay. So don't let the word gravel dissuade you from this. But there were some potholes that we got lucky, I think is the best way to put this, because the weather was beautiful on Sunday. Saturday, it was torrential downpours for the half marathon. And the puddles fill up and it can get messy if it's raining. So as long as you're open to the idea that you might not get a perfect course, it's not that bad. Like I said, it's not like a trail run where it's uneven. It's flat. You just have to be mindful of the little divots in it. But um I'm just going to make sure that's out there so you don't go in expecting a road race, with perfectly smooth asphalt. But that's the negative, even if it's not that bad. The positive, I had mentioned that it's a steady 1% downgrade the whole race. It feels like you're floating. It's
Awesome.
it's still a marathon. It's still hard. I'm not going to lie to you here, but I will tell you the parts that were flat felt
Yes.
like they were uphill.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, because you would get used to that slight downhill. It's not enough. It didn't make you feel like you were sprinting, but it felt like you were floating and like you would just go. And could you call that one of those downhill? It's certainly not like a Revel, you know, steep drop, but it was definitely a noticeable downhill that I would argue made it feel just a little bit easy, even if it was only a mental thing. If it
Yeah.
didn't, it's not a steep downhill, but mentally, it made it a good experience to run on.
Okay. All right. Well, that's great to hear everything. I assume you'd run it again if you could, or
If
if
I if I don't have anything lined up for the spring, which I'm still working on, I will happily do it again next year.
Derby Marathon.
We'll see what my plans are. I'm still shopping around.
All right. Well, we're going to look at the things. We'll see if we can pull them over to KDF. Something else. There's a few races that I enjoy. Yeah, we'll figure something else. But
Okay.
okay, we're going to wrap things up here for the Jim Thorpe Marathon. I would just like to remind everybody to run the race you're in, and Ford is a pace.